Okay, so this recording is just basically going to cover how to produce the actual final rendering of the meta mosaic, putting a background in and giving us some kind of ground plane topography, and also manipulating and giving us a little bit of effect in terms of how some of the materials in here render out in Illustrator, and also casting a drop shadow on our guy here. So the first thing I'm going to do, I want to just finish up everything I was doing in Rhino. So I'm going to Alt-Tab until I get into Rhino. And then what I want to do is actually render this out so I can create a shadow. And so if you don't change any of the settings on vRay, it'll automatically do this. We just need to change our output so that it does something at a relatively reasonable size. And we can go ahead and just hit render. And it's going to give us this guy here. All right, and then we can go ahead and save this image. I'll just save it to the desktop. And I want it as a PNG because that's going to maintain the transparency later. So I'll call this shadow. Okay. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and generate that graphic. I'll hop into Photoshop. You can see I already have this guy open here. I'll just open the one that I just created so we can put this all in one place. First thing I'm going to do is hit Control I. That inverts all of the colors. You can see that I'm missing some geometries in here. So I'm going to use my brush tool to go ahead and basically clean this guy up. And this gives us a nice clean area here. So I'm going to use my wand tool here, and I'm just going to go ahead, and if I hold Shift, I can select, oh, actually, sorry, I have contiguous select off, so it'll select anything that's in that area. And then so I can use my brush from there, and I can just, Control Shift I will invert my selection, and I can go ahead and paint this black. And then I'll hit Control D, and I can drop this down significantly so I can fill in some of these areas that might have been missed. So we have this graphic, and then we want to create a shadow, and shadows don't have hard edges. So if we go in here, we can go create a filter and blur. And using the motion blur, we can actually start to make this very exaggerated, but also you can make this feel softer. So I'm going to go ahead and just give it, looks about right. So I'll hit Control Save. And it's going to save it as a PNG, so I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Now we can do it in there. The second thing we're going to go ahead, we need a background. So what I've done here is I've gone and downloaded a photograph of some concrete. You can go on the web and do whatever you want. And then I want to make this feel kind of exaggerated, a little bit sort of acidy feel, and give it the sense of decay. So if I go under Image, we can go into the adjustments and adjust the brightness and contrast. I'm just going to pull that up, make that feel really, make those blacks feel really black and the whites feel really white. That, and Control Shift Save. I'm just going to throw this on the desktop as well. Save that. Okay. All right, and now we're ready to hop into Illustrator. So we have our graphic here that we've finished and completed. And I want to get this prepped and ready for everything that we're going to do here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control A. I don't really care for my line weight for this and the line color. So I'm going to take this as an opportunity to add some color in here. Just drag that up, throw in some magenta here. And then the stroke weight I also don't like, so I'm going to go ahead and drop that down to a little bit lighter. So we know we can add a little bit of color. And the second thing I want to do is I want some of these white areas to feel a little bit less flat, so they actually have some dimension. Because right now it almost feels like you can see through them. And so I'm going to go ahead and select same fill color, just like we did in the previous demo, selecting the same stroke color. And then I'm going to come over here to the fill, and I'm going to add a gradient. So I can see all this popped up. And over here you can see some of the settings for that gradient. So I'm just going to pull this back here. And then I'm also going to give this a little bit of color. So I'm going to double click on that. It's all black here. If we come up here, we can change this. This is eventually going to be for print. So I'm going to go to CMYK and pull the keystone down. And I really like magenta. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that up. So, all right. And then I'll just deselect that. You can start to see how that starts to look as a graphic. A little bit, just a little touch. So then what we're going to do is we need to add our shadow in here. So we'll go to the desktop with this. So we select this image. You'll note that this maintains the transparency as a PNG. Since it's black, it's okay. It's not going to affect the printing, even though this is an RGB. So I'm going to cut this. That's this guy. I'm just going to I'm going to shift, move him in to position here. Right. And then I'm going to arrange, I'm going to send him to the back, locate him. Right. And then we can also adjust the opacity in here if that's a little bit too prominent. We can make that feel a little bit lighter. All right. So now we have sort of this nice drop shadow, gives us another dimension to our graphic here. And the last thing we need to do is place the background. So I'm going to hit Control O. I'm just going to select this, cut it, close this guy down. I don't want to save it because I'll rewrite that. And just paste this in place. If I zoom out, Control minus, I can right click, and I did this quickly just a second ago, but I can change the arrangement of this and send this to the back. And you can do this with all the geometries that you like. So we come in here, I'm just going to Control Alt, scale that down so we get this guy to fit in my graphic. All right. And now we're starting to have this guy sit nicely on here, and he's sort of floating, so we're going to add a ground plane. And actually, in my Rhino file, I had produced a digital representation of this. Let's see if we can put this guy up. And here I have it saved. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this out. I'm just going to go ahead and paste it in here. This is quite large. Scale this down. Just holding shift to maintain the aspect ratio on this. And now, then I'm going to go ahead and start to manipulate this up and down. All right, and then we're going to start to play around with this. If I right click, I'm just going to group this so I can quickly select it again later. And this is not really doing anything, but we can start to play with some of the stroke techniques in Illustrator as well. So instead of going basic, I'm just going to go ahead and create this as a nice taper, and you can see that immediately updated. Instead of being uniform, I'm going to create a variable width profile, give this an increased stroke. You can see that made it really thick, but then I can drop the opacity down. And so you can see we started to create just interesting, a little bit more interesting graphic here. All right. And then what we can do, we're essentially ready to save this out. I'm going to go ahead and just shrink this down so it fits in our guy. All we need to do now is export this out of Illustrator. So we can go File, Export, and this is how we create the images or stuff for AutoCAD. There's a JPEG here, and we'll just go to the desktop, save it as Mosaic. CMYK, because it's going to eventually be for print. 300 DPI, that's a reasonable baseline for printing as well. So we'll go ahead and hit save. And then I'm just going to go ahead and pull up this guy so we can go onto our desktop here. And we can double click and check out our mosaic. There you go.